Testing, you all can hear me? All right. So thank you all for coming. This is our first public hearing for the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Mobile Counties program for Hurricane Sally and Zeta. There will be a question and answer section at the end of the presentation, so we ask that you hold your questions till the end. Slides will be available on the website afterward, and we are live streaming this as well. And so if you happen to be watching online and you have a question, we ask that you call 251-395-1431. We'll ask your question at the end as well. So this is our program staff. I'm Gordon Bauer, Director of Grants Management for Mobile County, joined by Renee Barron, our Deputy Director. We're also joined virtually by our consultant Haggerty, Laura Munifo, and Ashley Napier, as well as staff from the state's consultant, Horn. So this is our agenda for today. We're going to go over overview of the two hurricanes, CDBG-DR as a grant program, eligible activities, unmet needs assessment, local recovery plan, and next steps. So this is a snapshot of where we are now, what we've accomplished so far. So we have had 5 public engagement meetings spread out around Mobile County, gathering community feedback to get to the point where we are today. This is our first of 2 public hearings, and we also have a comment period, a public comment period going on right now for this plan. So an overview of those 2 hurricanes. Hurricane Sally was from September of 2020, landed as a Category 2 storm, and did an estimated $7.3 billion in damage to the U.S. Hurricane Zeta was just a month later, end of October 2020, Category 3 storm, and did an estimated $4.4 billion in damage. So an overview of CDBG-DR. It's a supporting piece in the recovery from a storm like this. So there's a process for how federal funding is applied to the recovery from these storms. It begins with insurance, then non-HUD federal funding such as FEMA and SBA, then DR comes in, and finally state, local, and other funding. So each funding source covers a different element, and you have to coordinate between those funding sources to maximize the recovery from the storms. This is a big picture overview of how this funding arrives from the federal to the local level. So it begins with a state declaration of disaster, followed by a presidential declaration of disaster, which is how FEMA and SBA become a part of the puzzle. Congress has to vote to award a funding package, the president signs it, and then it goes to HUD, federal notice for the CDBG-DR funding. And once it gets to HUD, this is the flow for how it comes to the local level. HUD, then state, then county, then program recipients on a local level. So for these 2 storms, HUD allocated just over $500 million to ADECA on the state level. Mobile County is a subrecipient of ADECA for over $28 million of that $500 million. And as a part of that subrecipient agreement, we have to complete an unmet needs assessment and develop a local recovery plan. So this is a more detailed breakdown of that $28 million. There's over $12 million specific for housing activities, over $15 million for non-housing activities, and a separate $1 million allocation for the local recovery planning program. So in order to be funded through CDBG-DR, each activity has to be eligible for DR funding, meet a CDBG national objective. There are 3 to choose from: low mod income benefit, urgent need, or the elimination of slums or blight. It has to have a direct or indirect tieback to the storm or disaster, and it has to meet an unmet recovery need. This is the big picture flow of the process that we're going through. So we have completed the unmet needs assessment. We are currently in the development of the local recovery plan phase. This will be followed by applications for funding, selection of projects or programs, implementation of those projects and programs, and finally closeout of those projects or programs. And it's important to remember that all this is contingent upon ADECA's approval of our local recovery plan. And now Renee is going to take us through the next two sections.
So our next section deals with eligibility. So HUD groups eligible activities for the CDBG-DR program into housing, infrastructure, economic revitalization, planning, and mitigation. As part of the subrecipient agreement with ADECA, the Mobile County Commission must spend a little over $12 million specifically on housing-related activities, and over $15 million must be spent on non-housing related activities. All potential projects and partners will be guided by eligible activities and unmet needs. Not all tribes and districts are guaranteed to receive CDBG-DR funding. ADECA is the responsible entity for assistance provided to eligible single-family properties affected by the disasters. This is handled through their HRAP program, also known as the Home Recovery Alabama program. This program, as stated, is specifically designed for single-family households. HRAP assists property owners by providing funding to repair, reconstruct, or replace single-family homes that suffered damage from one or both of the qualifying storms. The program serves low to moderate income households by qualifying in one of the 9 HUD and state designated most impacted districts. The HRAP application period is currently closed. DR funds can also cover a wide range of activities focused on recovery efforts. When we think in terms of housing, we're looking at new construction, rehabilitation, as well as demolition. The property type specifically lists single family, which we stated ADECA will be covering, multifamily, apartment complexes, and townhomes. HUD defines housing or affordable housing specifically as housing on which the occupant is paying no more than 30% of their gross income for housing costs, including utilities. Grantees must expend no less than 50% of their grant award for activities which support the recovery of households at or below 80% of area median income for Mobile County. CDBG-DR funds can also, in terms of eligible applicants, so we're looking at municipalities, we're looking at tribes, nonprofit organizations, as well as developers. After the development for affordable housing is completed, an application process for potential residents will be conducted targeting low to moderate income individuals in need of assistance. So some of the community-wide impact that we're looking at specifically, or that we looked at for the plan, economic stability, social cohesion, neighborhood revitalization, improved health and mental health, as well as positive educational outcomes. The non-housing allocation can be divided into 4 specific areas: infrastructure, economic revitalization, planning, and mitigation. Infrastructure, we're looking at repairs of roadways, bridges, public facilities. Economic development lends itself to workforce training and revitalization efforts. Planning can cover things from vulnerability studies and stormwater management plans. Mitigation addresses forward-thinking projects to prevent future damage and harm to people or property during or after disaster events. So, in addition to the eligible applicants that we talked about earlier, so For non-housing programs or projects, the following entities are eligible to apply: local and municipal governments, including departments and divisions, freestanding local and municipal government facilities, public schools, including districts and charter schools, public universities and colleges, public hospital and health systems, as well as nonprofits determined to be eligible to receive federal funding. Ineligible uses of funds include buildings for general conduct of government, operation and maintenance expenses, political activities, activities restricted in the appropriation laws, as well as activities with no link to identified disaster related impact. So, as part of the unmet needs assessment, we have several things that the unmet needs assessment must cover. So, it must be completed before deciding how to allocate the CDBG-DR funding, identify and prioritize critical unmet needs for long-term recovery, consider work already accomplished, as well as community goals and the county's capacity, each municipality, tribe, and or organization's data, and it's ultimately used to develop the local recovery plan. The unmet needs assessment process flow is as follows. Step 1, develop the assessment tools and data sets, which has been completed. Step 2, data collection, which is part of what we requested from each of the municipalities and tribes. Step 3, analyze the data. Step 4, determine strategies, looking specifically at infrastructure improvement, resilient housing solutions, as well as hardening of critical facilities. Step 5, prioritizing the needs. And then step 6, reporting and communicating the unmet needs. As a result, the housing unmet needs summary resulted in the following. And this was information that was resulted from data provided by the Housing Authority and housing affordability, FEMA individual assessment, insurance, as well as SBA loans. So when looking at housing affordability, we were also looking at the cost burden to Mobile County residents. FEMA, the data was collected directly from FEMA for individuals who applied for the individual assistance program, and insurance. That data was related to claims filed by individuals and households using their private insurance for Sally and Zeta. So as a result, the total housing unmet need project cost. As a result, the total unmet need specifically related to infrastructure ended up being $95,533,461. Gordon will now discuss details of the local recovery plan.
All right. So the local recovery plan is a guide for the use of this DR funding. It provides a framework for awarding projects and is based in large part on that unmet needs assessment. So it's important to keep in mind that all this funding is required to be spent by May of 2028, with closeout starting 6 months prior. So as stated previously, all of the uses of this funding have to have a tieback to those storms and to the unmet needs assessment. So we are required to prioritize and focus on what ADECA is calling most impacted and distressed recovery zones, or mid zones. So now we're going to get into the list of programs and projects that have been identified as a result of our planning process. So starting with the proposed affordable housing programs. The first program is the Homeownership Down Payment Assistance Program. This program will provide homeownership assistance, prioritizing low to moderate income individuals and those who lost their homes as a result of the storms in 2020. The budget for this program is just over $3.4 million. The second project under the housing category is the Voluntary Homeowner Buyout Project. So this project will require households in high flood risk areas that are deemed repetitive flood loss. And the idea is to make the community more resilient and reduce the hazards of flood risk from future storms. And the budget for this program is this project is $1.97 million. Third is the Development of Affordable Rental Housing Program. This program would look to construct new affordable housing units across Mobile County. These developments would be required to maintain their affordability status for at least 20 years, and the budget for this program is $5.1 million. And the final housing project is the Public Housing Authority Improvements Project. This project is aimed to repair damage from those two storms to housing authority properties and to make them more resilient to future storms. And the budget for this project is $1.64 million. So now we're going to get into the proposed infrastructure program and projects. The first one is the Permanent Generators for Critical Facilities. Program is aimed at installing and upgrading generators in critical facilities throughout the community, which will ensure continuous power supply during disasters, enhance resilience, and ensure the safety and well-being of residents. This program will have 3 phases: assessment and planning, followed by the installation of the generators, and then training and ongoing maintenance. And the budget for that program is $3,450,000. Next is the Woodland Drive Dam Repair and Reconstruction Project. It's an infrastructure project aimed at repairing and reconstructing a dam that was damaged during those storms and improving the resilience for future storms. And the budget for that project is $1,725,000. Next is the Disaster Shelter Project. This project is to construct a disaster shelter somewhere in the county, and it will meet all American Red Cross hurricane evacuation shelter selection standards. There's 2 phases to this project. The first will be identifying the location of it and evaluating the feasibility of that facility, as well as design of the facility itself, and then phase 2 would be construction of the shelter. And the budget for that project is just over $9,370,000. And finally is the First Responder HMGP Match Project. This would use the DR funding as match for a already identified hazard mitigation plan project, which is to build a disaster shelter for first responders to use during a storm. And the funding for this project is $690,000. So next steps. We are having public hearing number 1 right now. We will have a second public hearing to receive final comments on the local recovery plan on October 24th. The commission will vote on the plan on October 28th, and we hope to submit the plan to ADECA by the end of the month on October 31st. And again, this is a snapshot of where we are in the process. We've completed the unmet needs assessment. We are in the local recovery plan development phase, planning to submit by the end of the month, followed by applications, implementation, and then closeout. So that's We do have that email on the screen. If you prefer to submit your comments, questions there, they will be responded to either by email, and we will work them into the plan as well. We have the website posted there where you can see all of the past information on the planning process and have posted. But if there's no questions, then I guess we'll call it a day. Thank you all for attending.